The Witcher 3 is a masterclass in video game storytelling. The writing continues to resonate with players both old and new. One of the many strengths behind the story's success is the perfect act structure that separates each area of its massive open world. It masterfully changes the direction of the story while changing location based on the desires of its lead character.
Geralt of Rivia, Witcher with tenure.
Act structure is a core staple of storytelling. It's used in every medium, from plays to movies, television, and gaming. Acts are a unit of action bound by a character's desires. They separate each stage in the arc of the hero's journey. Many stories have either 3 or 5 acts. The truth is, you can have as many acts as you'd like. It all depends on the story. In The Witcher 3, Geralt's quest to find Ciri and stop the Wild Hunt takes place over 5 acts, each marked by a different location. Where each act begins and ends in the story is easy to locate, since they include some of the game's most memorable moments. Act 2 starts with Geralt observing the Hangman's Tree. At the end of the act, depending on your choices, Geralt sees the Baron hanging. Every act has 2 turning points within it, the latter of which acts as an explosion that sends the protagonist into a new world. The first turning point in every act is an inciting incident, one that shakes the story from its current trajectory. When you hear the term inciting incident, you might think it refers to one moment that takes place at the beginning of the story, but every act has one. It's a necessary catalyst to push the story from one act to the next while evolving the overall conflict. These include moments like the end to the Baron's quest in Act 2, where he tells Geralt about how he and Ciri battled the Griffin. Geralt learns that Ciri's left Velen for Novigrad after meeting the crones of Crookback Bog. This moment affects the central conflict, Geralt's desire to find Ciri. This desire drives the story and is impacted by these incidents. The story modifies this desire to push Geralt, and thus the player, to venture into a new area of the map as another act begins. This brings us to the second turning point. The second turning point in each act is typically the fallout of the inciting incident. It forces the character to change course. After the fallout with his family, the Baron either leaves with his wife or hangs himself. Geralt no longer needs his help to find Ciri. This part of the story has reached a dead end. This second turning point signals the end of the act. Geralt leaves Velen and heads for Novigrad, the next act in the story. When changing acts, stories often use a change of location to visualize the story moving into a different direction. Open world games like Red Dead Redemption, Grand Theft Auto, and The Witcher use acts to introduce players to new areas of the map. The acts in The Witcher 3 are the most notable because each new area that Geralt traverses, from White Orchard to Kaer Morhen, is unique. You can count the acts just by counting the locations, except for Vizima, which is more of an extension of Act 1. The different tones of each region help define these acts even further. The same goes for the area-specific questlines. Act structure also relies on another element that ties each subsequent act together. These moments are called act breaks. These transitional moments are the glue between acts. They serve as a breather after the explosive endings that conclude each act. We've all been there. You've killed the Griffin, escaped the Wild Hunt, and the Emperor has tasked you with finding your surrogate daughter. You need a minute to chat up your best gal in a tunic before jumping into your next Witcher contract. In The Witcher 3, one of the more memorable and lighthearted act breaks takes place after one of the lowest story moments in the game. Using the act structure analysis, the inciting incident in this act is the Battle of Kaer Morhen. The second is Vesemir's funeral. The act break is the snowball fight a few days later. With Geralt and his friends having been temporarily defeated, the final act is the rematch and final battle against the Wild Hunt. Great act structure also includes a great midpoint, a moment where the central conflict escalates. The Witcher 3 has a great one. Up to this point, the central conflict was about finding Ciri. From this point forward, the story shifts to stopping the Wild Hunt. Geralt's pursuit of Ciri turns into a high-stakes battle to stop the Wild Hunt from finding her and kickstarting the apocalypse. The moment on the Isle of Mists is a positive moment with something much darker right behind it. A character gains something vital, but in doing so ramps up the danger around them. As a writer, the midpoint is an important and tough story beat to nail down. It separates the overall story into 2 halves. The first half of The Witcher 3 asks if Geralt will find Ciri and what will happen when he finds her. The second half of the game serves as the answer to that question. Having well-defined acts in your story is akin to having a solid base to build a lovely house on. The stronger it is, the more stable the house will be long-term. Having a great midpoint that escalates the central conflict acts as a central support beam that pulls the entire house together. I'm not a carpenter, but you get the idea. The Witcher 3 is built on a solid foundation. The act structure is a large part of why the story remains enjoyable so many years later. It's a perfect example of great storytelling in an open world setting, one that I hope more games in its genre can learn from.